Good morning. It's good to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming and being here for this very important press conference discussing the invasion that's happening at our southern border. Also, our South Dakota troops that are currently serving down there and what we're seeing in this country and in our state as far as cartel and their affiliates, activities as far as drug proliferation and trafficking and the crime and violence that we're seeing. I'm going to start off today by reading you some quotes from a tribal leader. This quote is, "We need our federal partners in Congress to finally step up to the plate and to help curb the drug crisis. It is happening in Indian country. A generation of our people are now born plagued by gangs and cartels, human and drug trafficking, organized crime, abuse, and murder." Now, the state of South Dakota lacks criminal jurisdiction in many ways over Indian country crimes. In reality, the sole provider of law enforcement in these areas and in areas such as the Oglala Sioux tribe is the federal government. They have a responsibility to do that. We believe that this federal neglect has resulted in the cartel and their affiliates moving into our reservations, an increase in overdoses, an increase in crimes and violence, a proliferation of drugs that we've seen in recent years, and even drugs and guns that are more present on our school properties in those areas. 5 years ago, we hardly knew about fentanyl or what its impact was or its presence in the state of South Dakota. Today, we have rampant overdoses, we have violence, guns, cartels and their affiliates throughout our reservations and throughout the reservations in this country. Drug use and drug dealers are running rampant on many of these reservations, and the communities and the towns and the people and the families that live there are the true victims. I hope that we all recognize that that's why we are here today, is to talk about those victims and to work together in new agreements and partnerships to help bring them more safety and to make sure that their children can grow up in a country where they have opportunities. If we cannot stop the flow of drugs and the movement of this activity on federal lands that are under federal jurisdiction, something is very wrong with our current system. Now, these statements were made just 5 months ago in testimony in front of a U.S. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs by President Frank Starr comes out of the Oglala Sioux tribe. Yes, the quote that I read at the beginning of this press conference came from the president of the Oglala Sioux tribe, President Frank Starr comes out. It's the same President Starr comes out who has banished me from his reservation for making very similar comments, for saying the exact same thing that he said in front of that Senate committee, as far as the factual information, that the drug cartels and their affiliates and their criminal activity have made all of our communities unsafe. They've especially made our tribal reservations unsafe. And the problem doesn't start there. It starts thousands of miles from there. We all know that. It starts at the open border that is down along our southern border between the United States and Mexico, which has become a war zone because of the neglect of this administration, because of the neglect and the change of policies of President Biden and his administration. We have seen an infiltration of dangerous individuals, people that have come into this country that are on the known terrorist watch list, people that have been incarcerated in other countries that are perpetuating violence against others and coming into the United States of America and continuing those activities. Well, South Dakota is going to do something about it. We're not going to stand by and continue to ignore the problem that we're seeing every day right here in South Dakota. We're doing something about it at the border, and we're going to do something about it right here at home. Now, I just got back yesterday from a trip down to the southern border, visited with our soldiers that are currently deployed there. Currently, we have 20 National Guard soldiers that are serving. They're under the command of Lieutenant Hansen, who's doing a fantastic job working alongside Texas National Guard to build a barrier wall that is extremely effective at keeping the border secure. I was super impressed with them, and I was very grateful to have several people from South Dakota travel with me. You'll hear from them today. I had Secretary Flute come with me. He will share with you some stories of what South Dakotans are saying about this situation. We also had Elgin Young come along with us. He is our new tribal liaison and advisor to law enforcement that works for the state of South Dakota. He will share some of his experiences and his background with you. I also was blessed to have 3 of our legislators travel along with us. Senator Erin Tobin came with us. She couldn't be here for the press conference, but she was along for the day and met with the soldiers and got to see some of the activities that we partook in with the Border Patrol. And then also we had J.D. Wangsness come along, and then Senator Walsh traveled, and they are here with us today. We're also very grateful to have some of our local sheriffs that have mutual aid agreements with our tribes and are asking for more. And we'll talk about what we can do to improve those kinds of agreements and what we can do to train tribal officers here in South Dakota to make sure that they don't have to travel far away from their families, and what we're doing by creating a first of its kind law enforcement training academy as well. You know, when I visited with our South Dakota National Guard troops yesterday that are working to build that border wall, I was super impressed with them. They're an outstanding young group of patriots who are extremely grateful to be serving their country in this way. They know that what they're doing is making a difference. They're seeing that what they're building actually works, and they appreciate the fact that they get the chance to serve their country in such a way. This is going to help us keep cartel-driven drugs and human trafficking out of our country. And they know that they are serving a life of significance by making sure that they're actively contributing to the safety and security of the United States of America. Those soldiers represent the 6th deployment of South Dakota Guard troops to defend our border. As you know, we have sent troops several times over, and we're the first state in the country to send National Guard troops when Governor Greg Abbott first asked for help. I also recently went down there when the federal government sued Texas and was trying to force them to tear down the barrier. And when I was down there, the one thing that Governor Abbott asked for was people who knew how to help build. People who were builders. And so that's why we have an engineering unit down there today that's helping to facilitate and partnering with them to do that. Now, a lot of folks across the country would say, why does a small state care so much? Why does South Dakota care so much that we are sending soldiers over and over again to help and to partner with Texas to do this? And it is because the federal government is failing. They're not doing their job. And let me be clear, the federal government is breaking federal law by the policies that they have in place today. And so we will step up and we will continue to protect and do our role to protect the people of South Dakota and make sure that they are as safe as possible. Those failed border policies of President Biden have turned South Dakota into a border state, and we've seen the effects here every single day with the crime and the violence that's perpetuated within our own state borders. I have repeatedly reached out to all of our Native American tribes and their leaders, the tribal councils and their presidents and chairmen, and I've asked for mutual aid agreements so that we can partner together to bring law and order to their tribal areas. We also have spoken about facts that we've seen, what we've seen taking place on tribal lands, and listened to people that live in those communities and their stories and what they go through each and every day. Instead of working with me, many of them have chosen to banish me. And I will ask them right back, why have they not banished the cartels? Why have they not banished the cartel's affiliates? Why have they focused their attention on me, who has only offered them help, and not gone after those who are perpetuating violence against their own people? Banishing me does absolutely nothing to solve this problem. And all it does is help those who are perpetuating horrible violence and crimes against the people that are citizens of the state of South Dakota. I'm calling on all tribal leaders to address the cartels and the cartel affiliates from tribal lands. I'm going to speak to some of those facts today, and I'm also going to share some information with you that you maybe haven't known before. If you remember the last time I went to the southern border, I immediately came back and addressed the legislature. And the reason I did that was to be transparent, to share everything that I knew with the legislators on what I saw down there, what I heard, and what an unprecedented time we were serving in to see what was going on down at the southern border. Today is another one of those days where you may not be aware of really what all is going on in this country because you certainly haven't covered it in your news coverage. There have been over 80 stories written about me being banished. There hasn't been a single story that I've read to where you've really held a tribal leader accountable to seeing what they're doing to get rid of those who are perpetuating violence in their tribal areas. I would encourage you to go to our tribal leaders, to our presidents and our chairmen, and say, what are you doing to banish the cartel affiliates and the cartel that's in your areas? I'm going to speak to some of that today because it hasn't been widely reported. And when I gave my address about the war zone at the southern border to that joint session, I referenced a particular gang that we have seen operating on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and also a gang that calls themselves the Ghost Dancers. I know that many people said that I shouldn't have said the name of the gang, but I did not name the gang. They named themselves. They wear the patches proudly. It is a matter of fact in investigations. It's part of their strategy to hide behind this name so that people won't say it. But the truth is that this gang, the Ghost Dancers, is a Banditos, or in support of the Banditos Motorcycle Club. Now, FBI intelligence going back over a decade has shown that cartel affiliates and the cartels have been operating in tribal areas throughout this country. We know that for a fact. Look at the pictures that I'm showing you today and you will see the patches. You will see the presence of them in areas of the state and without other parts of the states, and drug trafficking on our reservations. Often use our reservations to hide because of jurisdictional challenges that we face. In one case, we had 3 drug traffickers, one from Guatemala, one from El Salvador, and another one that came into South Dakota to distribute meth, fentanyl, and heroin. They were pursued by law enforcement. They hit on the reservation. They wanted a new ride. They carjacked. It ended up with an FBI employee getting involved, and thank goodness the FBI employee was able to escape, but it was a well-reported fact. But what I would say is that these situations don't only happen on one reservation. They happen on other reservations, and not just in South Dakota, but in other states as well. This is a nationwide crisis that we see people who are committing crimes using our tribal areas as safe havens to proliferate a lot of their drugs and their trafficking, their raping of women and children, and their selling of human beings and perpetuating violence against them. Now, just the largest fentanyl bust in South Dakota history took place recently on the Sisseton Reservation. The Roberts County Sheriff seized enough fentanyl to kill the population of the state of South Dakota 4 times over. And the perpetuators of this fentanyl smuggling ring were a woman from California and a man from El Salvador. I'd like to introduce to you Secretary Flute, and I'd like him to share a few of the stories that have come into my office since we've been drawing attention to this crisis that we're seeing in South Dakota. He'll share with you some of the stories and testimonies of people who live on our tribal reservations and what they're dealing with, and share some of that. And I want to remind you that Secretary Flute is a former chairman of the Sisseton tribe. He also served in our military proudly. I'm grateful he's in my cabinet and one of my closest advisors, and I appreciate him being with me here today. So with that, I'll let him share a few of the stories and testimonies from some of the people that he knows that have been dramatically impacted.
All right, thank you, Governor. Well, mi taku dapi. Ja, juha chante washte na pechius api na mi taku api. Excuse me. Duena tateo na Diana michihu o wopida tanka ichichi api. Na wasana dedya hibki wopida. I want to say good morning to each and every one of you. I am honored to be here to talk about how we can restore public safety on South Dakota tribal reservations. You know, Governor Noem is speaking the truth of what is happening across the state, including in our tribal communities. She's speaking up because she cares about the safety of our people. But don't take it from her, and don't take it from me. Take it from the hundreds of calls, emails, and text messages that our administration has received from folks on tribal reservations asking the governor and supporting the governor's work, asking her for her help. Now, I'm going to read just a few of those examples here today of the people that have called, emailed, and text messaged this administration. This is from the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. I disagree with the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe's decision that banned you from coming here. To me, that speaks volumes for Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and the guilt they are portraying to the claims you have made. Another one, tribal leaders do not speak for all tribal enrollees, and we have our own voice. The drug use on the reservation needs to be looked into. This is from a member of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. Another one, we received a call from an individual who worked in casinos for 20 years as a security officer and saw the sex and drug trafficking firsthand. They saw cartel members pretend to work on dairy farms as a cover, and that reservations are their favorite place to go. They were personally threatened by a cartel member while working at the tribal casino. One caller has experienced housing corruption of emergency management programs, and egregious misuse of federal funds on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. They have videos of drug deals and sex trafficking taking place. They say the federal government was kind enough to give the tribe money, and our tribe put our own people in poverty. Our own Indian people did this. Another one, and finally, an anonymous member of the Oglala Sioux tribe called to thank the governor speaking the truth and stated that there is corruption amongst the tribal council and tribal employees covering for one another. The tribal council gave themselves a $10,000 raise, and some of them do not even live on the reservation. She stated that some of the council members are the largest drug dealers on the reservation, and that they personally benefit from Cartel being on the reservation. She stated that if tribal employees ask questions or push back, they are blackballed. They will lose their job, and they will be prohibited from working any place on the reservation. And finally, I'd like to say that Governor Noem wants our kids and our families to live in safe homes and safe communities. The reality is, tribal law enforcement does not have jurisdiction over non-tribal members. That's how the cartels slip through the cracks. There aren't tribal members. They are not tribal members, and there is not enough federal law enforcement presence to enforce the law. So as long as they are careful, they can hide on our reservations and take advantage of our tribal communities. I know families who have lost loved ones to overdoses and drug-related murders. I live on the reservation. I see it firsthand. And it is not always spoken out loud, but those drugs from the cartels, they come from the cartels. Everyone knows it, but not everyone says it. Governor Noem is trying to do something about it. She will not remain quiet, and neither will I. She is offering her help, and she is offering her heart. I have seen her step up for our tribal communities again and again. She is again stretching her arms out today to our Indian people. All of our tribes need to meet her in the middle and come to the table and talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Flute. We have been overwhelmed with the amount of phone calls, emails, conversations, meetings that I've personally had with people who have come to share their stories and their testimonies with us. Many of them are fearful of consequences of speaking out. Many of them realize it could financially hurt them with the tribe, that it could hurt their safety of their families. And they live in dangerous communities where they're not certain if their kids or their family members will be safe. So I appreciate those who have been bold enough to come forward and to share their stories with us so we can continue to work to build new relationships with our tribes to help bring safety to these communities. The reminder is that ultimately this responsibility lies with the federal government. They are the ones who have the responsibility for law and order in tribal reservations. We've had many conversations over the years with what the federal government should be doing and how they should be funding of public safety for our tribal reservations, how they are underfunding. And I have a long record of saying that they are underfunded, but we also need to make sure that those dollars are being spent appropriately once they get to the district level, once they get to the tribal level, once they get to the area level, that those public safety dollars are truly being utilized to make these communities more safe. I have a clip I want to show you right now. I've been calling out on this truth for months, asking for some coverage and for people to become aware of the true problem that we're dealing with here in South Dakota, how dangerous it is for our children and for our families that live in our tribal reservations, but even off of our tribal areas, the impact that we're seeing an increase in crimes and drug overdoses and fentanyl. I've asked our reporters to cover that and to go down there and to take their cameras and interview people that are living in these situations. I have not seen that. I have not seen the South Dakota media focus on it. It's been very disappointing for me to see the lack of coverage that has happened. But somebody else is covering it. You've probably heard of Chris Hansen. Chris Hansen from To Catch a Predator. He is well known, and earlier this week he shared with me some of the findings from his investigation that he conducted on the Pine Ridge Reservation and other reservations in the state of South Dakota. He showed me some video clips and his interactions with tribal members. Long story short, he has eyewitness testimony and documented proof that there is drug cartel presence and affiliates on reservations. And with that, I want to just show you one short clip of what he is working on to talk about the fentanyl crisis here in the United States and what we see happening right here in South Dakota as well. So with that, I'll turn your attention to the clip.
this clip available to them?
Can you unplug the computer and play it, the audio in the room?
There's a whole traffic pattern. Pretty much what you're experiencing.
Yes, we've dealt with the cartel already here, and where we had people from the reservation that's been killed by the cartel. Where is the fentanyl coming from?
Right now, as far as we know, it all comes from Mexico.
Mexico.
It comes from Mexico, and it comes through different channels, Denver, different places like that, right here to the reservation.
These are vast communities.
They are.
Living, in some cases, destitute.
The cartels have found a haven.
You know, they might hand them a couple of guns, some cash, say, go do this for me, and it makes them feel like somebody. So then that's how they get involved in it and more deep. And then the next thing you know, 90% of the young people right now are doing a lot of prison time.
Now, our next speaker doesn't need Chris Hansen to tell him about how drugs and cartel influence are destroying our tribal communities. Chris Hansen will be coming out with a lot more footage and a lot more information that he gathered while he was here in South Dakota. And he is doing a larger series that has to do with fentanyl in the United States of America, but focusing as well on well-documented testimony and evidence of what is happening on reservations throughout the country. But the next speaker that we have doesn't just hear the stories, he actually has lived it. I'm proud to welcome someone to our team that has a long history of serving this nation in the military. He also worked within BIA for many years, the Bureau of Indian Administration, understands how funding comes to our tribes and how it flows to our tribes and how it can best be utilized, and recently served as a chief of police down in Pine Ridge as the Oglala Sioux Tribe's chief of police for several years, and now he is an advisor to me on law enforcement, what we can do to build mutual aid agreements to bring more safety to these communities. He's done his very best his entire life to keep his community safe, even when he's been faced with incredible challenges such as an inadequate federal funding. I'd like to welcome Algin Young, our new tribal law enforcement liaison, to say a few words today.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. My name is Algin Young. I'm an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux Tribe. I have over 23 years of Indian country law enforcement with both BIA and tribal programs. I was Associate Director for BIA, as well as a Regional Agent in Charge and Director for Indian Highway Safety, just to name a few positions. I am very proud to join Governor Noem and her administration in the role of tribal liaison between the state of South Dakota and each of the 9 tribes. I will also be a senior advisor to the Governor's Office, the Department of Tribal Relations, and the Department of Public Safety. In this position, I get to stay connected with Indian country law enforcement and make a positive difference in South Dakota. I have testified in front of the United States Senate Committee on Indian Affairs about the drug crimes that impact our reservations. Recently, I testified to the increase of illegal drugs and the increase of gun crimes, which I testified to. Gun crimes are we were facing 2.5 gun calls a day in my previous position. In closing, I took the position with the governor because her position is they need help, and that's what we intend to work for. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Next, I wanted to invite our legislators to come forward and to share some of their experiences. We had 3 legislators travel yesterday with us to the southern border. We spent some time with our soldiers building the barrier wall, had the chance to visit with them about that, and then also went to another location down in the Del Rio sector where that Border Patrol unit is in charge of 240 miles of the southern border. And I had the chance to go out with Secretary Flute and ride horse with them on patrol and go down to the river and spend some time covering some miles, talking about the challenges that they face every single day. What was interesting to me is that these Border Patrol officers said that no elected official that they remember has ever taken the time to go out there and actually ride a patrol with them like that before, spend that many hours with them, and to hear their stories of the true challenges that they face. They've recognized the change in policies and how that impacts the flow over the border. They also talk about the fact that now they see crossing the border the same amount of people in 1 week that they used to see happen and cross in a year. And the one thing I said, what do you wish people like me knew and what do you need the most? And they said, what we need is timely adjudication. They need that when somebody comes into this country illegally, them to get a court date and to be processed and to be deported on a timely manner. They said when someone comes into this country that's not supposed to be here and not following federal law, they shouldn't get a court date that's 5 or 6 years into the future. That they need to have the resources from the federal government to make sure that they're able to do their jobs and that they're able to bring safety to the United States of America. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mike Walsh to come forward and share a little bit of what his thoughts on what his day was like yesterday down at the southern border.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Mike Walsh. I'm the District 35 State Senator, retired law enforcement and former military member, and both of those things come into play here. First, visiting with the soldiers down there, I was inspired. They are motivated, they are dedicated, and they're working very hard. It's not just what they told me, that they're happy, they're pleased to be down there. It's the levity in which they were working. It's the way they spoke. Having been around military people my entire life, I know when they're happy and when they're not. And these soldiers down there under the command of Lieutenant Hanson were doing a fantastic job and we're happy to be there. Second, with the drug problem, I spent 6 years in narcotics. I got to see firsthand every case we worked, the devastation that it reaped on children. And that's the reality. The kids don't have a vote in this. And the amount of drugs coming across the border is staggering, not just on the reservations, but the entire state of South Dakota, including my district. This is what the governor's trying to prevent. This is what the governor's trying to solve. I got to see firsthand her dedication to what's going on down there. Because it doesn't just affect the United States, it affects South Dakota directly. And it was evident as we spoke with the Border Patrol, as we spoke with the soldiers, that they see it every day. They see the changes that have occurred in the past few years, and they're working very hard to solve that problem. These soldiers and these Border Patrol officers who are working mere feet from cartel-controlled territory are dedicated to their job. And I came away from this experience inspired to do my part to help not only the state of South Dakota, but the governor in her mission. Thank you.
Next, we have J.D. Wangsness, who's going to come up and share with you some of his thoughts on the day.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Representative J.D. Wangsness, District 23. I serve on the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, so it's important for me to go down and see what our troops are doing and how our mission is unfolding down at the border. They're very motivated. The morale is great. They're enjoying getting their job done in a timely manner. Talking to the guardsmen and also to Border Patrol is very enlightening. There's changes being made and they're very positive changes. We are having an impact on the border and the problems with it. So, and as far as for my district and District 23, well, I don't have a reservation on it. We border reservations. And this isn't just a reservation problem. This is a statewide problem. Earlier this week in Han County, there was an arrest with significant amount of drugs seized and illegal weapons and things like that. So we have to work together. I'm looking forward to working with Mr. Young and with Secretary Flute and finding solutions to the problems that we have with the drugs in our whole state. It's a public protection issue. We've got to take care to look out for our kids and our grandkids because it's all over. It's a big issue. I appreciate the governor inviting me along for this trip. It was very educational, and thank you very much.
Thank you, JD. I appreciate that. We're going to be giving you an article as well that I think you'll be able to utilize in your reporting that is a DEA report that finds that there's cartel and cartel affiliates operating in every single state in the United States of America. It is followed up with this report that has been put out giving you facts and information that you may find helpful that shows that there is cartel activity in every single state of the United States of America, which will help you with some of the information that you need to put together stories covering what's happening here in South Dakota in our tribal areas, but also in other places and other states that are struggling with these same challenges. In fact, we've seen congressional leaders be very bold. I know I've been very outspoken as a governor as to what's happening in our tribal reservation areas. I want to remind you of my history. I've served in the state legislature before and saw some of the challenges we saw with poverty and underfunding that happened to our tribes back then. Served in Congress for 8 years and worked with our tribes to get them resources that they needed to help take better care of their communities and their people, housing dollars. I served on the state committee for the Farm Service Agency, which oversaw a lot of projects in tribal areas. Then also now as governor have said repeatedly over and over again that we wanted to partner with our tribes in new ways. We work with them on a daily basis. We sign sales tax agreements, gaming compacts. We respond in emergency situations. If there is a flood, we send in teams to help rescue. We deliver wood with our National Guard to their elders and help care for them in stormy weather. We help clear their roads. We work with them on child protective services. Our Department of Social Services interacts with our tribes every single day. There's incredible partnerships that are going on consistently with how we're responding and how we're able to serve and work with our tribes. And those are partnerships that don't always get talked about, but they happen every day with the state of South Dakota. In fact, we even were the first state, and I was the first governor to put state employees in our IHS facilities to help with caseloads and to help process paperwork, so that those cases could get referred quicker and people could get better health care that are getting health care taken care of by Indian Health Services. So with all of that, we have several congressional leaders that have been bold, speaking out on what they have seen as far as cartel activity in their states. We have videos that we will share with you after this press conference, but I want to read to you what some of their quotes were. One of them was from Senator John Tester, who is from Montana, and he said in a congressional hearing, "I can speak to this issue from the large land-based tribes which we have in Montana. I'm telling you what you guys live. We've got cartels in Indian country, and we've got a lot of bad shit going on." President Jeffrey Stiffarm from Fort Belcamp Indian Community in Montana also said, "We're fighting a losing battle. The cartels are winning. The drug dealers are winning, and they're overrunning our reservations. They encounter them, the cartels, pretty much on a daily basis, and the remoteness of our reservation and the access to get into the remote areas, it's pretty easy for these cartels to come through. There's back roads from the Rocky Boy Reservation to Fort Belknap, and that's one of the routes that they take. A couple of weeks ago, we had a cartel killing in Rocky Boy. They killed 2 tribal members. We are left alone to fight this battle." Representative Bruce Westerman from Arkansas, he said, "Just recently we held a field hearing down in southern Arizona, and Sheriff Mac Daniels made a statement, 'We're no longer dealing with an illegal immigration problem. We're dealing with an organized crime problem that reaches from sea to shining sea, and that includes Indian country.'" And then President Frank Starr comes out from the Oglala Sioux tribe right here in South Dakota. Were made in front of that U.S. Senate committee in December 20th in 2023, that we need our federal partners in Congress to finally step up to the plate and to help curb the drug crisis in Indian country. A generation of our people are now born plagued by gangs and cartels, human and drug trafficking, organized crime, abuse, and murder. Every day we see more fentanyl enter our reservation. The relationship between these drugs and child abuse and neglect, robbery, domestic violence, and gun activity is a very real problem. The state of South Dakota lacks criminal jurisdiction over Indian country crimes. Thus, in reality, the sole provider of law enforcement services to Oglala Sioux tribe is the federal government. We believe this federal neglect has resulted in the cartel moving on our reservation, an increase in overdoses, and a proliferation of guns on our school properties. These videos will all be made available to you so that you will have them for your reporting. But I also want you to know that we have heard these stories, these testimonies, and these facts from Democrats, from Republicans, and from tribal leaders, and from people who live in these communities, including those here in South Dakota and those in our neighboring states. We've heard it from our own tribal leaders here in South Dakota. They have said that they cannot do this alone, that they need partnerships, and that is what we have continuously offered, is mutual aid agreements that the state of South Dakota will participate in that will help them bring safety to their communities. We have continuously said that we will do that, even though that is not a role that the state of South Dakota typically fills. But we've done it before in different ways for short periods of time, but we are willing to step up and to do that and have offered that repeatedly. My state agencies are consistently working with our tribes to meet thousands of needs that happens in every aspect of their lives, from child welfare to emergency response, tax collection agreements. Our Governor's Office of Economic Development gave a $250,000 loan to a small grocery store in Pickstown in the Yankton Reservation. DSS collects and distributes child support to more than 2,000 different tribal court orders. Our Division of Motor Vehicles facilitated more than 2,500 driver's licenses just this last year on Pine Ridge alone. Our Game Fish and Parks conservation officers conduct joint operations with tribal COs all the time. Law enforcement mutual aid agreements will go a long ways to help restore safety and order. I'm hopeful our tribal leaders will partner with us in a new way to do that. We stand ready to help. Banishing me does not help anything. What I would ask them is, why do they not banish those who are committing the crimes in their tribal areas and partner with us to bring safety to their people? Let's fight to protect our women and our children from rape. Let's fight to protect our children and our women and our people from human trafficking. Let's bring peace and safety to communities that are overrun with drugs and with gun violence. I'm going to be very honest with all of you. I'm very disappointed in your coverage of this situation. I'm very disappointed in the fact that South Dakota is not paying attention and making sure that we're working and holding leaders accountable to doing what they can to serve people, to make sure that kids can get up in the morning and go to school safely and can come home and walk the streets and be safe at night. I'm going to continue to do my job and to continue to work together, but I also want to bring forward a couple of our sheriffs that we have with us that have worked with some of our tribes and talk about the impact that we can have with these mutual aid agreements, and also about how important it is that for the first time we believe ever a state is stepping up, like South Dakota is with our Attorney General, to create a tribal law enforcement training academy. For years, what has happened is our tribal officers and BIA officers have had to go to New Mexico for a 13-week training in order to come back and serve their communities. I have offered, and many of our tribes are taking us up on the opportunity to get trained right here in South Dakota so they don't have to leave their families for 13 weeks. They can go through an academy that we will pay for, the state of South Dakota, the Attorney General's office, free of charge to our tribes, and many of our tribes are taking advantage of that opportunity. This is something that these sheriffs have talked to me about, have asked me to do. We did it. And we are hopeful that it will be extremely successful, not just in making it easier for tribal officers to get trained and put into place to be able to operate and partner more with our tribes in those councils, but also that it'll build relationships. It'll build relationships between those instructors and other agencies that are trained here in South Dakota and improve the kind of partnerships that we need to see develop. So I'd like to ask if the sheriffs would like to come up and share a few words with us. I think that would be fantastic.
Hello, my name is Ash Arpan. I'm the sheriff for Dewey County. I'm a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, and my county is on Cheyenne River. I am a veteran officer, police officer. I myself know what it's like to be assaulted in the line of duty when I was a tribal officer. I was stabbed by an individual that was under the influence of drugs. And so I got to see the impact to my family, being a victim and being placed in that situation. So when we talk about the drug issues on the reservations, it rings true to me. I want to see us have more solutions, and I think that the academy that the governor has initiated for tribal officers, I think is a positive step and a good step. And my hope is that in the future we can have more solutions and less focus on politics. But thank you.
My name is Gary Cudmore. I'm the sheriff of Zebah County up in Dupree. I'm an enrolled Cheyenne River tribal member. The academy that the governor has started up will be a great thing because like I said, you go to Artesia, I've been to Artesia, to the Indian Police Academy for 13 weeks solid, came back, got hired on with the sheriff's office. I went through the state academy. It was good because I was home on the weekends. I could work a couple shifts. I still had a home life. But, you know, when you're stuck down in Artesia for 13 straight weeks, it gets a little nerve-wracking with everything else. But like I said, the program that the governor is starting up, you know, everything's paid for. They can come home on the weekends, still have some family time, and I think it's a great asset for our reservations. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for being here today, and I appreciate your interest in this. Yesterday, when we were at the border, I was extremely grateful for the time that was spent with us with the Border Patrol, how much time they spend giving us information on what they saw at the southern border and the challenges that they face, what new policies can bring, even just what enforcement of federal law can bring, and how grateful they were for our South Dakota National Guard members that are down there. I know I want to take a minute to speak to the families of those South Dakota National Guard members. We have seen our National Guard members activated over and over again, either federally deployed or in state activation or in service to another state, and they do so because they love this country. And a country with no borders is no country at all. And that is truly what we are seeing at the southern border right now. And we have seen now that that battle and that invasion has infiltrated the state of South Dakota. That is why we are talking about this today. And that is why we are talking about how proud we are of our soldiers that are down there building this barrier wall that is working and is helping to secure and give us more safety down there and helping slow down the flow. But also we need to take some action here at home as well. We have communities that are suffering with a lot of violence, and they are suffering with drugs, and it is impacting every single community in the state. And I'm hopeful that we can get new partnerships with tribal leaders that will want to work together to enforce tribal law and to bring law and order to areas in a way that we haven't done before. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you may have.
Please, Strubinger, SCPB, what's your plan for getting tribal governments to sign on to these mutual aid agreements?
You know, I think Secretary Flute and Algin are going to be incredibly powerful. Their knowledge and understanding of what it's like to be in tribal government is wonderful. They've sat in their shoes, they've been there and seen the challenges, and I'm open to new ideas. If they want to sign an agreement that looks different than what the state has done before, I'm all ears. I've had some of the chairmen and presidents reach out and want to know what they would look like. We've had some participate in the past. But I also am hopeful that Algin will bring some new ideas. He's been in leadership in BIA, which I've never had that kind of wisdom in my office before, that understands how the formula works, how underfunded it is, and why we need to pass audits, why these tribes need to be audited, and not just at the tribal level, down at the district level, that there's some accountability there to how it's spent so that we can go to Congress and make an ask for more dollars and prove that they are underfunding our law enforcement. So that really is a strategic approach that we're using that I'm hopeful our tribal leaders will partner with us in a way that they just haven't before. And these two men come in a good way with a good heart, recognizing that they want to help and serve their communities as well. Yes.
South Dakota Searchlight, how many officers have signed up for the training course, do you know?
You know, it's fluctuated because they sign up and then they go through background checks and paperwork. I think at this point in time we have 13. We may have 15. So they continue to have the ability to sign up. We think that's fantastic. I don't know if it's 4 or 5 different tribes that are sending tribal law enforcement officers, but we will have a full class regardless. And again, I appreciate the Attorney General partnering with us on that. When I asked him to do this and brought this idea to him after visiting with the sheriffs, that this really would be helpful in recruitment. Boy, he worked hard and we made it happen, and this summer is when that will begin. I believe it'll begin June 1st. What's the date? 3rd. Okay, June 3rd.
Governor Austin Gossett, Dakota Scout. With the bans from a majority of the state's tribes, how do you work back from that and try to re-bridge that relationship so that you can accomplish a lot of what you've talked about today?
I keep calling them. They all have my personal cell phone number. We reach out every month and send them a letter just reinforcing and send them emails and calls. I think that Secretary Flute probably hears from most of them on a weekly basis, don't you? It's phone calls, text messages. Tribal council members are very powerful in these positions. Many of these tribal councils are split. Some of the members of the tribal council want to do an agreement and some don't. And, you talk about politics, there's politics that happens at the tribal level as well. But I think Algin and his relationships will be helpful. And if they go and have those conversations, I'm willing to be creative and see what we can do to make them work. Yes.
Governor Jody Heemster, DRG Media Group of Beer. Logistically, how does it look for the U.S. Attorney's Office? Would they be involved if these tribal officers are being state certified versus federally certified? Mm-hmm. Does that create any jurisdiction legal issues as far as the arrests they make and whether the state certification qualifies them to make those federal?
Well, and maybe Algin can add some more details, but BIA is partnering with us in this, so they have the ability to get the BIA training that they need here in South Dakota too as well. And then our tribal law enforcement officers have gone through our academies before, but they've had to leave for a few weeks and go down to New Mexico in order to complete it. Now they can get the entire training here as well. And Algin, if you want to add some more perspective, you sure can.
Governor, I think you hit it right on the head. It's already happening, and like the sheriff's talked about, it's going to be a one-stop shop for everything. So the 2 weeks of Indian law is going to be streamlined to 2 days in this training. So it's going to work. Thank you.
So it's happening. It's just being bigger now.
Yep.
It's happening, and they will still be tribal law enforcement officers like they've always been. They'll get their training here, but they'll also be able to get their BIA certification here in South Dakota too, which is wonderful. Many times tribal officers have had to go to New Mexico for the full 13 weeks, or if they chose to go through our academy, they at least had to go there for 2 weeks away from their families to do that. That's no longer necessary. This is the first time we believe that a state has done an academy training like this for tribal law enforcement officers and BIA officers. And we're grateful for the idea that came from our sheriffs and brought it to us. It's been discussed before in the past, but it's wonderful to see the amount of partnerships that have already happened from it and that some of the tribes are taking advantage of it.
Governor.
Yes,
Governor,
one more
JP
question.
KORN News Radio.
Corn, yes, go ahead. Was that JP?
Thank you very much. Yes, that's me.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, JP.
Thank you very much. I was wondering regarding reaction from the federal side of law enforcement here. What are they thinking about the state providing the training to the tribal officers?
Well, I won't speak for them, I guess, but BIA has participated and has been willing to send instructors to do the BIA training here, so that's been good. It's been wonderful. The problem we have, I think, is not enough hands on the ground, feet on the ground, help on the ground as far as federal agencies and resources. So we're going to continue to advocate for that. I think that is something that we'll be working with our federal delegation to make sure that we have more funding that comes to the tribes that is actually put into officers and their training. And yes, last question. Yep.
Governor, what I'm hearing from you today is that cartel influence is not only a major issue on tribal land, but statewide and nationwide, right?
Correct.
Okay. So why so much focus on tribal land and not Sioux Falls, where we have two major interstates intersect, where we have Rapid City, or the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally? Why focus on cartel activity so much on some of our most rural areas instead of our most urban areas?
We are very focused in those areas, and we've got great partnerships there with local law enforcement, with leaders there. That happens every single day. The problem that we have right now is that these cartels and their affiliates are finding a haven in our tribal reservation areas, and the crimes that are being committed there have increased so dramatically the last several years. And these community members keep reaching out asking for help. Everybody knows that when you get into tribal areas, the jurisdiction challenges are there. What's the responsibility of the federal government? What do the treaties say is the responsibility of the federal government versus the state? They're a sovereign nation, so that's a different relationship than what we have with the city of Sioux Falls or the city of Rapid City, but counties sign mutual aid agreements with our tribes as well. So that's a wonderful model that we can participate in. My message to our tribal leaders is bring to me your ideas. Let's work together. Stop focusing on politics and banishing me. Bring to me a solution. Let's banish the cartels and their affiliates from your land so that we truly can protect all of our people.
Governor,
With
one of
that,
the tribal
I will
chairman has
thank
asked
you
for
very
an apology
much.
about comments you made about children on the reservations. Do you plan on issuing an apology about those comments that were done in March? Okay.
Are you referring to the March 13th town hall and winter